Yeah. So the film that I'll be showing is a film called Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. It was a film that came out in 1967, shortly after the time the Civil Rights Act was passed. Now, it was really the first film to really deal with interracial marriage. And at that time in America, race was a very ambiguous issue. It was a very complex issue. There were a crop of filmmakers during the 60s, during that time, a crop of Jewish filmmakers. Stanley Kramer, Norman Jewison, Guy Green, just to name a couple. Douglas Sirk, you could even say to a degree. But they were very compassionate towards African Americans, namely for a number of different reasons. After the Holocaust, post-World War II, Jewish people in Europe were subject to the similar type of oppression that African Americans were going through, namely in the South. So Jewish people at that time, they were very compassionate, and they actually formed a kind of a liberal coalition, Jewish people and black people, and they marched to Selma with Martin Luther King. Now the filmmaker Stanley Kramer, he was a mensch. Anybody know what mensch means? Okay, in Yiddish it means like great one, like someone that did a good deed. Most of his films were very liberal films. He wanted to say something about the times. Now, when he made Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, when they were in pre-production, he actually told the studios asked him, "What is this film about?" And he said, "Oh, it's about family." And they said, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's with Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn, and Sidney Poitier." And they're like, "Oh, okay." So he kept it secret from the studios, and every now and then they would want to come on the set, or they would want to ask him about it, and he kept just trying to distract them, because he didn't want them to know what it was about, because he was fearful that if they found out what it was about, that they would just cancel the film. So he kept that secret. He wanted to say something about those times. And like I said, it came out in 1967. 1968, a lot happened. Martin Luther King got assassinated. Bobby Kennedy. We're at the 50th anniversary. It's 50 years. So I definitely think a film like this is pretty appropriate, especially to today's times. We're right now kind of in such a polarized place. And I think race is probably the most complex issue, to talk about. But this particular film made audiences really look at interracial marriage, and look at African Americans differently. And the lead actor, Sidney Poitier, who you're going to see, he was the first black actor to win an Oscar in 1963 for a movie called Lilies of the Field. And you know who was the second black actor to win Best Actor, the Academy Awards? Denzel Washington for Training Day. So can you imagine that gap from 1963? Best Actor was Sidney Poitier, whom you see there, and that's Stanley Kramer. They made many films together. So that's a pretty big gap. And Kramer's movies, really a lot of his films dealt with what was going on in the times. He made a couple films that really touched on race, and he was a great filmmaker, and regarded as probably one of the best. Steven Spielberg, this is one of Steven Spielberg's role models, Stanley Kramer. So we'll show that film, and throughout the movie, I'll kind of just talk you through what happened in the scene, the history of it, and secondly, you would think this film too, because it showed African Americans and interracial marriage in a different light. And you would actually think that maybe, it would have helped, it would have served something, but there was kind of a microcosm with this film, because in the African American community, a lot of people came back with the backlash saying, well, this character, he's a doctor, he's like this, well-off guy, very intelligent, and it takes that much to marry into a white family. So there was somewhat of a microcosm, a backlash because of his character, or because he was so dignified. And they felt, oh, he had to be this dignified to be accepted into a white family, and he read white. So there was some backlash, but namely, Sidney Poitier is really regarded as, the Jackie Robinson of acting, the first, lead black actor to go that far. So throughout the film, I'll definitely tell you some behind-the-scenes stuff, and I think you guys will enjoy it. This is a film that's really dear to me. Has really great performances in it. I haven't even spoke about Spencer Tracy, which is one of the greatest film actors. He plays the father of the daughter that he's trying to marry. And Tracy was very unique. I think I've mentioned him, but he always would look down at his mark. And if you look in his films, he's looking down, but he had this great way of just letting people into who he was. Camera doesn't love everybody. Camera loved him. Just the littlest subtleties in his face would just read. And an actor one time asked him for advice, said, can you give me, he's a 3-time Oscar winner. Can you give me advice on acting? And he said, know your lines and don't bump into furniture. He wasn't a method actor. And then Katharine Hepburn is in here too. They were a couple, and those two actors were pretty much cinematic royalty in those days. I can't even think of anybody today that you can compare them to. But put it this way, Sidney Poitier was so intimidated working with Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy, and he had already won an Oscar at this time in his life, so he was a star in his own right. He would tell Stanley Kramer when he would do certain scenes, he couldn't look at them. He was too shy, so he says, I'll just say my lines to chairs. And Spencer Tracy too had cancer at this time. This was his last film, and he was only working about 6 hours on the set. And you kind of see that he's tired. But so before we start the film, I'm going to just hand out a brief exam. I gave you guys some handouts last week, and hope you guys read it. And it's multiple choice. Yeah, you got it. Thank you.